Hello students, I welcome you all to Current Affair Lectures by Azad ICS Academy, and today we are going to see the current affairs of 1st of January 2025. And before we, go to understanding each and every topic of today's current affairs, I wish you everyone a very happy new year, and may all your dreams come true this year, you know. May you achieve all your goals. Right. So from 1st of Jan 2025, we have decided that we will go a little more in detail of the current affairs. As we have seen that in the previous year's question papers, what I have seen here is that some of the questions or some of the statements are directly picked up from the Hindu newspaper itself. So now whatever content that I will be presenting in front of you, I will be basically discussing about those same topic that are there in the Hindu. That is, I I'll be using the same words or same sentences that are used in the Hindu so that it becomes easier for you to understand it. And there is no need of you to separately read the question paper. If you just see the current affairs is more than enough, right? And I'll also try to come up with such a kind of questions that can be asked probably in your prelims as well. Right now, and we will also go into details of each and every topic so that you don't have to go and do any kind of research. That is another thing that I want you to focus upon. So, first topic today that we have here in our discussion is about the Conference of Parties 29, Climate Finance and its Optical Illusion. First thing is, before we go into details of this particular topic, I want you to understand the background here. And the background is very big. So, please stay with me. There are a lot of things that we need to understand. First is, we'll have to understand that. See, what happened here is over a long period of time, okay, since 30 to 40 years back, if you go, people realized that there is a lot of issue in the environment. And that is how there were three important conventions that were born. Okay. And one of such important convention that was there here is your United Nations Framework Convention on climate change. See, we have understood that there is a lot of issues that have happened because of rise in the climate, I mean, rise in the temperature on the earth. And because of this, there's a lot of climate change that's happening. And because of that, this was one of the important outcome, okay, basically of Rio Earth Summit. I'm just giving you the background of Conference of Parties here, right? So we are discussing Conference of Parties 29, and it is under UNFCCC. So that is United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Now, what is this and what was it established for? The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change it was adopted on basically 9th May 1992. Okay. And what we need to understand is, and it was open for registration at Rio Earth Summit. Okay. And in basically, like, this is some basic information or background that you need to understand over here. Now, it came into force on March 21st, 1994. Okay. After receiving the required number of signatures or ratifications, it came into force. Right now, we have 197 parties which are a part of this particular UNFCC. Okay, making it most widely supported by international treaties because most of the countries, want to support this because most of the countries know that climate change is an issue and they want to fight against this. Now, what is the primary goal or primary objective of this? Is to stabilize greenhouse gas. So we need to understand greenhouse gas emission concentration to prevent the dangerous interference with climate change. And it also allows to, ecosystems to adopt, ensure food security and all of this and do sustainable development. Major important objective of UNFCCC is climate change. And when it comes to climate change, we all have to understand climate change is happening because of the global warming, right? And the global warming is happening because of the greenhouse gases. I hope all of you are clear with this concept. Now, what exactly happens under this particular UNFCCC? First important thing that we have to understand is there will be a lot of conference of parties. Now, what is this conference of parties? It is a supreme decision-making power, okay, which meets annually, means every year they meet, and they're going to decide what they are, annually meet, okay, not meets, annually they meet, and they are going to assess the progress and negotiate the new commitments. So whatever they had decided in the previous one, they'll check whether that has happened or no, and they're going to check with a new provision. Now, who is going to give some kind of financial mechanism? If there is any financial mechanism that is there related to UNFCCC, And that financial mechanism that we have here is, it is Green Climate Fund. And along with that, we also have Global Environment Facility. They provide financial support to developing countries and to help them meet their climatic commitments. So if there is a developing country like India, etc., okay, to these developing countries, they will give some kind of financial support if required. Okay, so that these developing countries can fulfill their commitments. This is something that we need to understand. Now, apart from this, see, I am not going to go into all the detailed conference of parties. Out of these conference of parties, there are some important conference of parties that you need to know. One of them is Conference of Parties 3 that happened in 1997. Okay, now see, it was introduced in 1992, but everybody had to sign and it came to force in 1994. And later, after 3 years, there was a very important protocol, which was called as Kyoto Protocol, which happened in Japan. Okay, and here they realized that before whatever three conference of parties happened, it was not that important. And here, 1997, the Kyoto Protocol that came up, that was very, very important. We'll discuss more in detail about Kyoto Protocol. Okay, apart from that, we also adopted Paris Agreement in 2015. Okay, and here we also have now Conference of Parties of 29, which happened in Baku, Azerbaijan. Now, the problem here is there is a lot of issues that have happened in Conference of Parties of 29, not just for United Nations Framework on Convention of Climate Change. There are other frameworks also which are not up to the mark. Okay, now please understand that this is the background of your United Nations uh, Framework Convention on Climate Change. But what we need to understand here is that these are the frameworks that we have, but these are not enough. Okay, like you can say, now I will discuss about a little bit about Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement. Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement, these basically they were signed before by big developed countries. Okay, now Kyoto Protocol was trying to tell that if any country is not, they said that they are going to penalize the people who are not going to follow whatever is mentioned in the Kyoto Protocol. Okay, they said that okay, the developed countries will have to do their emission less, and developing countries can there, I mean, there is nothing like binding for all the developed countries. Okay, let me just erase this entire thing and like um, show it to you now. Please understand what happens in Kyoto Protocol. This is very, very important. Now, why am I discussing this? Is because there are some important words that are there here. Now, these words are changing when it comes to Conference of Parties 29. Okay, we have to understand the background when UNFCCC started, since then to whatever happened at present. So this is how you're supposed to link, because the question can come from any of these topics, because now this is something which is important, right? So we have understood what is UNFCCC. Now we have to understand the Kyoto Protocol, because that was the first important protocol. I'm not saying that before this there were no protocols or there were no conference of parties. They were there, but they are not important again, because you don't have to remember all the 29 conference of parties, which is not practical. But the major important ones, or the terminologies which we are now using in the Baku, what do you mean to say, conference of party, for that, to understand that in a better manner, there are some terminologies that we need to understand from the previous protocols. So we will understand that now. So the Kyoto Protocol that was adopted on the Conference of Parties 3 in Kyoto, this was happened in 1997, as already gave you the uh, background. What we need to understand it is, for the first time, it was the first world's, what you can say, agreement that was legally binding targets. So they said that they gave some targets, and these targets were legally binding. That means you have to follow these targets, okay, for reducing the greenhouse gases. Now, basically what they did here is, in the Kyoto Protocol, they made a structure. So they wanted to combat global warming by reducing greenhouse gas concentration, so that, it is not going to exacerbate, or it is not going to make the effects more of global warming and climate change, right? So that is what they wanted to do. And because of this, what they came up with here is, see, there were two things they did. There is a concept called as, okay, here, this is the first time, common but differentiated responsibilities. Now, please understand what is common. The common goal that we have is to reduce greenhouse emission, right? Greenhouse gas emission. We want to reduce the greenhouse emission, but it is not going to be same for everybody. It is going to be different for different people. That is how it is going to be different. It is going to be different for two groupings. So we need to understand that we have two types of groupings. right? What is one type of grouping? We have developed countries, right? And we have developing countries. Now, when it comes to developed countries, see, it could be Europe, especially the western part like USA, Europe, and all of them. They had a lot of industrial revolution. They were the people who have been a part of, the greenhouse emission that has happened so far, right? So from a long period of time, these are the people who are emitting all these greenhouse gases, right? And because of this only, we are facing now climate change. So what you need to understand here is that these developed countries, because they did this emission, now they have to take responsibilities, and their responsibilities will be higher because they are the people who, were more contribution to the greenhouse emission. And the developing countries like India and other countries like India, China, etc., they will not have any binding. Means whatever this legal binding is there, this is only for developing countries. Sorry, developed countries. Legally binding for them, but for them, this is not legally binding. For them, they will have some other, like they can do it voluntarily, basically. Okay. So you need to understand that what you have to do here is they basically divided it. How they divided it is they divided it into four categories. Now, what are the four categories? We have something called as Annex 1 countries. Okay. In the Annex 1 countries, these include all the, please understand, developed countries who are super, rich, you can say, plus the countries which are economy in transition, means who are like, see, between developed and between developing countries, means they are not completely developed, but they are not in the developing stage also. Almost like they are developed only. So such kind of countries which are called as economy in transition. So all those countries were put in Annexure 1. Okay. Now these countries will have binding targets. Now similarly, under this particular section itself, they did something which is called as Annex 2 countries. In this Annex 2 countries, it comprises only of those countries which are super developed. Here we are not talking about economy in transition. See, when it comes to Annex 1, it is talking about the developed countries as well as economy in transition. But Annex 2 is a kind of a subset of Annex 1 countries. Okay. And they are only the developed countries that we have here. Right. And what we need to understand here is they are required to provide finance and technological support too. Means these super developed countries, like example, you have USA, UK, etc. here, they are super developed countries. They will have to give financial support and also provide some technological support to whom? To the developing countries like India, China, etc., as well as other countries like economy in transition. Right? This is Annex 2 countries. Now we have another set of countries which are known as Annex B countries. Now Annex B countries list countries with a specific emission target. Means they have, here what we need to know, there are list of countries, they will have a specific emission target. Means they have to, reduce their target. So and so. That is from 2008 to 2012. They have to reduce their emission. This is what was basically being present. Apart from this, they had no non-annexure countries. These are all those developing countries, right? And then we had something which is called as least developed countries. Okay, there are a lot of countries. They were exempted from binding targets due to the limited contribution because they were not at all a part of, contribution to greenhouse emission. So they are not having any bindings. Even non-annexure countries do not have any bindings, right? It is voluntary action actually. They should actually focus on, or you can say it is a voluntary action. And India comes under non-annex countries, primarily all developing countries because India is a developing country and we do not have any binding emission. I mean, there is no binding also. So this is something that we need to understand when it comes to Kyoto Protocol. Apart from this, in the Kyoto Protocol itself, okay, we have to understand there were around 6 important, what do you mean to say? Greenhouse gases that were identified. First one was, because they may ask you these questions, carbon dioxide. Obviously, this is understood. And then if you're a serious aspirant, even if you're not a serious aspirant, you will be knowing about these gases more often. Methane. And then you have nitrous oxide. And you also have sulfur, hexafluoride, right? And then you have group of hydrofluorides, some of the hydrofluorides, and some of the parafluorides. or perfluorocarbofluorides, or you can say plurofluorocarbofluorides. Fluorocarbofluorides. Sorry, one second. It is, let me write it properly. It is yeah, carbons, perfluorocarbons. These are some of the important, what you mean to say, greenhouse gases that were notified basically. Okay. Now, what happened here is India also was a part of it. Now, how these countries, I mean, like how this entire mechanism was happening. Now, what happened here is, see, let us, the entire process of this Kyoto Protocol was carried out in three different mechanisms, right? So, for example, if I'm now putting binding, how am I putting binding? What are the rules and regulations that the country need to follow when it comes to Kyoto Protocol? This was done in three important mechanisms. Now, here is the concept of carbon trading. Because in the last month, when we were discussing a lot of current affairs, and we saw that there was a lot of discussion that was happening when it comes to carbon dioxide, carbon trading, etc. So this concept of carbon trading came from Kyoto Protocol itself, right? So for example, here there are three important mechanisms. Okay, I'll explain each one of them with an example so that you understand. Now here, one is called as clean development mechanism, and there is something called as emission trading, and then you also have something called as joint implementation. So we'll discuss each one of them with an example so that you understand what are these things. So first thing, let us understand about a situation. So that is clean development mechanism. So even if you are aware, like if you have not read this before, here you will understand what is this clean development mechanism. Let us assume that there is one country which is a developed country. Okay, let us assume that the country is maybe UK. Just giving you an example. Now, under Kyoto Protocol, UK can only emit, let us assume that it can only emit some amount of carbon. That is only, let us assume that 1 ton of carbon or something like that. Okay. So like this, or you can say 100 units of carbon. Let us do units. Let that be units anything. Only 100 units of carbon. But UK has emitted 110 units of carbon now. Okay, because it has now done what? 10 units extra. So in this case, what will happen here is it is binding. It was binding that it has to only use 100 units of carbon, but now UK has, emitted 110 units of carbon. So under Kyoto Protocol, this will have to be penalized. That means there will be some kind of punishment that will be given to UK, but UK can basically skip that punishment. How it can skip that punishment here is that, okay, now, so this UK can come to India. Okay. In India, we are now having a thermal power plant. Thermal power plant means it is running on what? Coal. Now, UK can say, come and say that we will help you set up solar power plant. Okay. Now, when they are helping us in solar power plant, what they're trying to do here is this entire thermal power plant, the emission of carbon dioxide is got reduced. They are helping other countries. Okay, that is clean development mechanism. So see, they're helping in clean development mechanism here. Okay, so hence they can earn some carbon credit. Okay, they will earn what? They'll earn something called as carbon credit. So they can show this carbon credit basically. What is this? This is a certified emission reduction credits. Means we are showing them, or because UK has helped India to reduce their carbon emission, maybe by 10 units of carbon dioxide is reduced, and they can balance this. This is called as clean development mechanism, right? So such projects can be saleable, certified, emission reduction credits. Each one of them, there is some kind of definite this thing, like one credit is equal to 1 ton of carbon dioxide, right? So such one certificate will have 1 ton of carbon dioxide is reduced, then you will get one credit card. Okay, carbon credit card or carbon credit. So this is just an example that I've given you. In simple terms, what you need to understand here is that the developed countries emit more and lose carbon credit. Okay, so they provide financial assistance to developing countries. So you can see that they are now providing some kind of financial assistance to the developing countries, okay, or the least developed countries to create clean energy like solar, wind energy, etc. So that they can get some kind of what carbon credits, so they can meet their Kyoto units or Kyoto quota. Okay, this is clean development mechanism. Now, next is we have also seen about something which is called as what? It is carbon trading or emission trading, you can say. Under carbon credit trading mechanism, countries that emit more carbon, then the quota allocated to them can buy carbon that I've already told you, right? Apart from this, okay, the developing nations such as India turns out to be a seller. So if India is there, it can also sell the carbon credits. Eventually, they can also get some monetary benefits. And this basically emission that's happening here is called as what? Emission trading. So because I'm emitting more, what I can do here is I can go and get this kind of credit from other developing countries. So if you are helping them in setting up a power plant, in that case it becomes a clean development mechanism. But you're not getting this, or you're not setting up this. What you're doing is you're getting this certificate from India and giving money to India in turn of that. So in that case, it becomes a emission trading because you're doing a trade, because you're doing a trade of this particular certificate. Now to get this certificate, what you're going to do, you're going to give some money, or you're going to give some kind of monetary benefit to a particular developing country. Then this becomes what? This becomes your emission trading. Next is that is joint implement. Joint implement offers parties flexibly and cost effective. So basically there are two developing countries. They can come together, okay, and they can do some kind of project that can benefit the entire world, or entire what do you mean to say? Uh, Basically entire world. So that is joint implementation. So this offers parties a flexible and cost-effective means of fulfilling their Kyoto commitments, while host party benefits from the foreign investment and the technology transfer. So like this, maybe one country is getting technology transfer, another country is getting some kind of monetary benefits or something like that, or foreign investment or something. And because of this, both the countries, which are both of them are developing now, and both of them come together and they are implementing. So this is something that we have to understand, that all these things are happening here in Kyoto Protocol. But the point is that this Kyoto Protocol is not a success because it is a failure. The reason why it is failure is because most of the people did not want to be a part of it. Similarly, there is, after this comes a Paris Agreement. In the Paris Agreement, there is very, very important thing that resulted in the Paris Agreement, and that is something that we need to understand, like what exactly happened in the Paris Agreement. Here also there is one new thing that comes up into picture. Okay, now why am I discussing this is because, see, in this we discussed something which is called common but different responsibility, or differentiated responsibility. Okay, and we have seen that this was binding. And later comes what, your Paris Agreement. In the Paris Agreement, what was major that you need to remember here is, this happened in 2015, right? In the Paris Agreement, it says that we have to limit the global warming. Whatever global warming is happening, we need to limit this particular global warming below 2 degrees Celsius. Means we cannot rise the temperature above 2 degrees. It should be below 2 degrees Celsius itself. And we need to focus on 1.5 degree itself, or it should not even exceed that. And introduce something which is called as nationally determined contribution. This concept of nationally determined contribution, that is, every country will come up with their own contribution. That you guys come up with how much you want to, basically contribute. You only set up your, goals. We will not give you goals because Kyoto Protocol was not followed by everybody. Do you think that they will be able to give? Obviously, no. So this is something that is, not possible. And similarly, you need to understand that before 2024, what happened here is, the developed countries, please understand, developed countries had to pay $100 billion every year, okay, to the developing countries. Do technology transfer, right? So this did not happen. Like in the 6 years, only once, like in 6 years, total of, this much money was given. So this money also was not given, and that is why this entire current affairs that we are studying is now based on the same thing. See, Kyoto Protocol was not a success because most of them did not adhere to whatever targets that were given to them. Most of them came out of the, they left, or they withdrew from this particular agreement, you can say, because the developed countries do not want to give money to the developing countries. Why would USA or UK, now come up and say that we will give you technology or something like that, especially after COVID. That has become very difficult for other countries like USA to even help countries like China or something like that. So it's not possible for the developed countries to give some kind of assistance to the developing countries. This is something that is very, very important and we need to focus upon, right? Apart from this, what we need to understand here is, there is one more important topic which is called as IPCC. Now IPCC, because here in this particular slide that we are going to discuss, there is a word called IPCC. What is this IPCC and what exactly it does? Now we will understand this a little bit and then go to the current affair, which is very, very important for this year's exam. See, IPCC is nothing but Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Now, what is this Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change? It is again a United Nations body, right? UN body itself. Now, what are these doing? What is this body doing? It is assessing the science related to the climate change. It was created in 1988, okay? And it now who are all a part of it? Like it was created by World Meteorological Department, plus you have United Nations Environment Protection. These you will study again differently in environment ecology. I will not go into that detail right now, okay? This IPCC is now having what, or it was created by World Meteorological Department and United Nations Environment Program. And the objective was to provide government at all the levels with scientific information. So it is now going to provide what? It is going to provide about the scientific information that is related to the climate change. So whatever scientific information that is related to the climate change is given by IPCC. Now it does not conduct its own research. Thousands of people all over the world, okay, voluntarily contribute to this particular work. They are not doing it purposely or they're not doing it by themselves. Now what they're doing is they are coming up with something which is called as IPCC assessment report. Okay. This is going to give us a report about the knowledge on climate change, its causes, what are the impacts, etc. Right. So since its inception, since it has started in 1988, so IPCC had 6 assessment cycles and delivered 6 assessment reports. Right. So the current report that we have is the 6th assessment report. It's divided into 3 segments, okay, 3 working groups and a synthetic report. Okay. So this is something that we need to understand a basic background. Okay. Now, this is the entire background. Now, let us have some basic information regarding the news that is, which is important for your this year prelims also, and that is Conference of Parties 29 of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Now, I hope we are all clear with what is UNFCCC. And we are also clear of what is the different conference of parties like Kyoto Protocol, Paris Agreement, right? After that, we have also seen what is International or Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Now we will understand about Conference of Parties 29, okay? This was under, again, UNFCCC itself. And it is a crucial international meeting that was trying to address the climate change. And it was scheduled from 11th November to 22nd November, okay, 2024. And this happened in Baku. These are some of the important points that we need to understand, and this is in the Baku Stadium that happened to be in Azerbaijan. So this is something that we need to understand. Now the conference aimed to advise global efforts on climate change mitigation. See, every year the same thing happens. Okay, they want to come up with climate financing, mitigation goals, adaptation strategy. This is something like there are a lot of students that I find, or a lot of people who make a lot of plans, but they do not execute their plan. Means Conference of Parties so far from 30 to 35 years, whatever is happening is not at all you can say useful, because some of the countries are following it. India is trying to do better. But some of the developed countries who have to give money are not doing it or are not following it, is something that we need to understand over here, right? Now, what is the significance or the important theme that we are talking about, or the theme for this particular conference of parties was investing in livable planet for all. Means we have to invest. This is for all, not for all. Right? So we need to invest in a planet in which everybody are able to live properly for all. Right? So this is the theme that they wanted to discuss about. And we've already discussed about Kyoto Protocol, Paris Agreement, Glasgow. I mean, these are some of the other important conference of parties before this particular conference of party. Now, what was the objective that was mentioned in the conference of party 29? The first thing is that, now listen, so far we had seen that in Kyoto Protocol, we had something called as common but different responsibilities, right? Similarly, in Paris Agreement, we had something called as nationally determined contribution, NDC. Right now in Baku, we have a new concept which is called as, here it establishes a new thing, and that is called as what? New collection or new collective quantified goals. So at Baku, what do we have? We have NCQG. Okay, for financial resources and support, especially for developing countries. And this is basically for whom? It is going to be for developing countries. Now, mitigation and adaptation strengthen commitments to reduce greenhouse gases, of course. There should be technology transfer, that is promote climate friendly technology. Like in India, we are trying to promote, electric vehicles, FAME, right? We have discussed FAME a lot more in detail in previous lectures, right? So FAME is one of the important things that we have understood. Now, also evaluate the progress towards Paris Agreement in the longer run. Now, India's role and India's contribution. This is something that we need to understand. India's role, right? Now, what is India's role? We will have a net zero target. That means the entire emission will be up to 2070. Right now, we are in 25. Okay, around 45 years later. Okay, that is what we have to understand. Renewable energy, that is, our target is to have 500 gigawatts of energy of renewable capacity, or we are going to get this much amount of energy from the renewable energy or renewable capacity itself. And this is going to be done by 2030. Okay. Now, apart from this, we are also having our NDC, that is nationally determined contribution. What is the nationally determined contribution? Which is including 45% of a reduction in carbon dioxide emission or carbon intensity. Okay. So, and sourcing around 50% of energy from the renewable resources. So we are trying to do this, reduce the carbon dioxide emission or carbon intensity. Okay, reduction in carbon intensity. Okay. And also 50% of sources of energy from renewable energies. This is something that we are trying to do. Okay. Apart from this, we have a lot of current challenges and developments that are there. The first important thing that we have to understand here is the finance, climate finance deadlock. Developing countries express concerns over unmet. So we have to understand, I said in the previous slide, I must have written million, it is billion actually. See, this much $1 billion, that is $100 billion of money was supposed to be given by whom? The developed countries, okay, to the developing countries, so that there can be a kind of economic transfer, I mean, technology transfer and some kind of, technology enhancement, and we shift to the renewable source of energy. Now, if you want to shift from non-renewable sources of energy to renewable sources of energy, there is a lot of money that is required, initial investment, and that was supposed to be done by the developed countries. But these developed countries are not doing it. Now, this is what we are going to address in the today's important concept, and that is what is mentioned in the climate finance. So you can see it as an optical illusion, means illusion is something which does not exist. Okay. Now, please focus on what it is talking about. Here you can see that there are some statements. Now, reading this article will become easy because you know the static part that is related to this particular topic. See, finance has been a major point for climate change negotiations since the launch of United Nations-led climate change United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, that is UNFCCC, in 1992. I already told you. In this, there is an article, okay, under this particular UNFCCC, there is an article which is called 4, subclause 7 of this particular UNFCCC clearly states that, okay, extent to which developed countries partly will be fulfilling their climate action commitments is contingent, or it is depending on how much finance and technology they get from the developed country parties. So here we need to understand that the developing countries are depending, in simple words, what does this particular say? Is depending on what? It is depending on developed countries' finances. How much developed country finances will provide, that much development this particular developing countries is going to do, or they will be able to fulfill their climate action commitments. If these people do not give money to the developing countries, how will these countries fulfill their commitments? This is something that is being highlighted over here. So that is basically mentioned in Article 4. That is, developing countries' commitment are depending on developed countries' finances. Now, the Paris Agreement retains in its Article 9, Clause 1, the provision related to finance binding the developed countries. So I already told you that binding the developing countries to mobilize finances for the developed countries. So here you need to understand that in the Paris Agreement also, it is talking that developed countries, okay, developed countries have to mobilize, that is, have to give some kind of finances to the developing countries. Okay, here also it is retaining the same thing. Now you can see the 6th assessment report. If you remember, when I discussed about international or intergovernmental panel of climate change, they basically have done a lot of assessments. They have done 6 assessment, and the present one that we have is the 6th assessment. Okay, the 6th assessment report of IPCC has described finance capacity building and transfer of technology as critical enablers. Means, please understand, the 6th assessment report that is there from IPCC. Okay, this is also talking about what? It is also talking that finance is what is very, very critical, or described finance capacity building. So two things here: capacity building and finance capacity building and technology transfer, both of them. Technology transfer as a critical enablers. So if develop in all the three situations, that is, it is talking about in this article, or even in the article of Paris Agreement, or even the 6th assessment report of IPCC is also talking about finance capacity building and the technology transfer has to be done from what? Has to be done from the developing countries to the developed countries. That is what is mentioning here. Okay. Action in developing countries in their backdrop of anthropogenic greenhouse emission response to 1.1 degrees Celsius of global. Okay. So this is something that we need to understand. This is that is mentioned in the newspaper. Now, in the pursuance of their responsibility, the developed countries agreed in 2009 that they would collectively mobilize $100 billion a year by 2020. Means every year they are going to give this. Then 100 billion mark met by the developing countries only in 2022. So you need to understand that they said that they will give it by 2020 and they will give it every year. But you can see that all together they gave only this much money. That does not match the growing needs of the climate finance. So you need to understand that this particular money that they are giving is not matching the climatic needs, right? So apart from that, you need to also understand there's another important word that came up from Paris Agreement, that is the climate financing corresponding to the developing countries' nationally determined contributions. So whatever money this developed countries are giving, you know, developed countries are giving the developing countries, it's not matching. They are not able to fulfill their, nationally determined contribution. Right? Now, secondly, the mark has been considered in many reports to be well short of estimated finance to fund the action needed across the different sectors to keep the average global temperature rise within 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. The 29th Conference of Parties meeting at Baku, Azerbaijan in November 2024 was meant for the parties to the Paris Agreement to have new collective quantified goals. So now we have discussed here new collective quantified goals. What are new collective quantified goals? These are estimated in the Baku Conference of Parties. Okay, replacing $100 billion floor to laying a new floor taking into account. Now they say that, okay, you don't give us $100 billion, but we will now have a new number. Okay, that is what you need to give. Accounts the need that prioritizing for also priorities of developing countries to tackle the climate crisis. Now what we are discussing is, now we are not going to take $100 million, right? Now we will have some other number. That is what is mentioning, so that developing countries can tackle their climate issues. In response to the persistent demand by all the major negotiation group belonging to the developing South, that the developed North mobilize. So you need to understand that the developing people who are at the below, they will have to get money, and who are going to get this? That the developed North or a developed, North mobilize around $1.3 trillion by 2030. They need to give this much money. How much money? $1.3 trillion. This much money is now required to basically do this. Okay. And the development North agreed to release only, look, they said that you want $1.3 trillion, but the developed countries are only agreeing to release how much dollars? $300 billion per year by 2035. This $300 billion marks the ignorance of estimations by UNFCCC Standard Committee on Finance relating to the annual financial needs of developing countries, which is derived for their nationally determined commitments. As this estimate, the financial needs stand in between somewhere around this much billion to this much billion, even if these figures cross around half of it cost 5,760 costed and non-costed needs identified by 98 developing countries in their nationally determined contributions. Third report of independent high-level expert group of climate finance, November 2024. So what you need to understand from this particular thing here is, see, I'll tell you in simple words. The developed countries have agreed to give only $300 billion every year. Okay. Till 2035. But how much we need? We need the developing countries to fulfill their nationally determined contribution. They need $1.3 trillion. But they are saying that they will only give this much money. This is the basic. You can see that there's a optical illusion. Why is the heading called as climate finance and optical illusion? Is because we need this much money, but we are only going to get this much money. The decision on this particular NCQG make a reference to financial needs for those particularly vulnerable to adverse effect of climate changing, leading to least development countries and small island developing countries. But these do not make minimum allocation floor. So you can see that least developed countries and very, very small island developing countries are not going to get any kind of, what you mean to say, money at all. Right? They will get minimum allocations basically. These are something that we need to understand. Apart from this, during these meetings, the Alliance of Small Islands States demanded the allocation of 39 billion for these particular small island developing states, while the LDCs demanded at least 220 billion for them. It appears that the first ever global stake in the concept in this particular, Paris Agreement that happened in 2020. I mean, whatever discussions that were happening regarding the Paris Agreement in 2023 also failed its influence, right? And this also damaged the concern. And in this particular estimation, that is global stock take estimation, economic costs that are estimating to reach around this much billion by 2030. Here you need to understand, for the first time in this particular Baku Conference of Parties, you can see that small island nations, like small island states, are asking for this much money for their development, and least development people are also, or least developed countries are also demanding this much for the first time, right? And India, and what are India's NCQGs? Now, India's perspective on delivering the climate finance from the developed north to the developing north is derived from equity framing expressed in principle of common but different responsibilities and respective capabilities. It is notable that India joined the Montreal Protocol to protect the ozone layer for further depletion, which led to setup of multilateral fund, right, including the additional 80 million for use in India, China, and other regional now low income parties. So India is anyways always India is trying to do its best. Whatever commitments it has done nationally, determined commitments, whatever India has done, it is trying to fulfill all the demands. Similarly, what has happened here is now Montreal Protocol, which was there to protect the ozone layer, India was also a part of it, right? And India did notably there as well, right? So hence it is going to do very pretty good, even if it comes to, these kind of new goals as well. And this is something that we need to understand, but there's a lot of issue. During Conference of Parties, India specified that the new floor should mobilize $1.3 trillion by 2030, on which at least 600 billion should come in the form of grants and program, just transaction work program and GSTs. So here India is talking about how much money it wants. And it should come in the form of what? Grants itself, right? That we should not pay, or we should not pay back, or something like that. India has also expressed its extreme disappointment on adoption of this particular NCQG in its present forms, shaping which was without the consultation. I mean, it was not mentioned, or it was not done with the consultation. And it made serious objections against the Conference of Party presidencies and secretariat in the way it was initialized, which is at the expense of trust, collaboration, and contravention of UNFCCC's norms. So here, what you need to understand is that India is also not that very happy with what has happened here in Conference of Parties in 29, or Conference of Parties 29, because whatever these things that are coming up, whatever new floor that have been put, it was not done with the kind of, what you mean to say, collaboration or something like that. It's just put forward. So hence India is also very disappointed with this kind of adaptation that was there in this particular NCQG. Now, what the development north must do? The pit and substance of the Paris Agreement are the nationally determined contributions. In expecting the developing south to bring out more ambition, altering to the mitigation of greenhouse gases and implementing the same effectively, it is equally important on the part of the developed north to raise their scale and quality of climate finance, and also sincere efforts in putting place the coherent climate finance architectures. This will ensure adequately direct accessibility and affordable climate financing to the developing countries. So at the end, what we need to understand from this particular article here is that developing countries should increase their nationally determined contribution, do more, or that is reduce the emission of carbon dioxide, Similarly, developed countries should mobilize more finances. This is something that we need to understand, or if this particular question comes in your mains also, how are you supposed to end your answer? Is that the developing countries should focus more on their reduction of carbon dioxide, should do uh, more of nationally determined contributions, and developing countries should mobilize more finances and helping the developing countries in financial support and also in the technology transfer. This would basically, or this will ensure that there is adequate and direct accessibility and affordable climate financing that is available to developing countries. And that is how, all together everybody can peacefully resolve this. See, developing countries want more money and developed countries do not want to give money. This is a kind of a fight that's happening. And I hope this entire concept is very, very clear to everybody. Right? I have not missed out on any of the topics or any of the things that are mentioned. We have discussed what is NDC, that is nationally determined contribution, that every country will come up with their own goals and they'll try to fulfill those goals. Okay. Anyways, if you do not fulfill these goals, also you'll not be kind of penalized, but at least whatever you have, told for yourself, at least you will be able to do that. That is the major thing that we are trying to do over here, right? So apart from this, what we need to understand here is next important topic that we're going to discuss for today. Here is Quad vows to work vigorously towards free, stable Indo-Pacific. Now, what is this particular concept of Quad? I'll give you a small brief background about this particular Quad, and then we will go to what is mentioned in this particular article, a very small article, not something big. Now, basically, Quad stands for Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. Okay, it is commonly referred as Quad. Now, it is a strategic forum that involves four major democracies. What are the four major democracies? Please look: India, US, Australia, and Japan. Okay. Now, these are the democracies. Okay. And they have convinced as a response to changing dynamics in the Indo-Pacific region, particularly concerning China's growth. See, now China is growing, and if China controls Indo-Pacific region or Indian Ocean region, it is going to be very difficult. So we do not want China to dominate much. So hence these four countries have come together so that we are having stable Indo-Pacific region for the trade, right? So this is something that is very, very important for us to understand over here, right? Now, what is this exactly, or why this is in news? India and other Quad members on Tuesday reaffirmed the grouping steadfast commitment to work towards free, open, and peaceful Indo-Pacific amid China's increasing military muscle flexing into the region. So again, same thing. These countries are becoming very strong because they want to stand against China. If China is trying to take over this region, then it is going to be very difficult for other countries. Now, foreign ministries of each member nations have the grouping made a pledge to joint statement commemorating a 20th anniversary. So this is a 20th anniversary, and all the finance ministers have basically come and they've pledged to be in a joint statement. Joint statemently, they are commemorating this 20-year anniversary of Quad Corporation. So which are the important countries here? You can see India, USA, Australia and Japan came together 20 years ago to extend assistance in response to 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami. Okay, Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami happened, and because in response to that, these four countries came together and they have a Quad nation now. And that coagulation subsequently took in the formation of Quad. Now, in the last few years, the Quad has rolled out a number of initiatives addressing some of the most pressing needs and challenges of Indo-Pacific region, including the areas of maritime security. So here, why this is there? So that they can, focus more on maritime security, infrastructure, and connectivity. Right. Apart from this, the foreign ministry of the four nations said that the Quad would work together in responding to the further needs of Indo-Pacific Ocean. Like Indo-Pacific region, whatever needs are there, all the ministers are going to come together and they're going to respond. As a four partners, we share a vision of free and open Indo-Pacific that is peaceful, stable, and prosperous, underpinning by effective regional institution, the joint statement said. The Quad foreign ministers also talked about centrality of other, they're also talking about how other regional groupings they are going to help or associated with, like Asian countries and Indo-Pacific. We affirm our unwavering support, means the Quad is also telling that they are going to affirm or they are going to give support to Asian countries. Yet we'll discuss more about Asian countries when we are discussing your international relations, or maybe I'll come up with some time where I will be discussing all these small, small concepts as well, right? We respect Pacific-led religion architecture, foremost the Pacific Island or Pacific Island forums. We are also steadfasting our support in Indian Ocean Rim Association. So there are many other associations that we have. We have Indian Ocean Rim Association is there. It is talking about three important things here. One is your Asian countries, another is your Indian Ocean Rim Organization, and another is something that is Pacific led regional architecture. So these are the things that they said that we are also supporting all these things so that we can keep our strength strong in Indo-Pacific region. This is something that we are going to understand. And that's all for today. Okay. Next class, that is in tomorrow's class, I'll be coming up with questions as well as we will be discussing more in detail about the other topics that are there. I hope you have liked this session. I've tried to keep it more comprehensive because the first topic that we discussed about Conference of Parties 29, and we have discussed about other topics that are related as well, right? So we will continue more of such videos, more current affairs. So I will see you in tomorrow's lecture with more current affairs and questions as well. Thank you so much.